In a perfect world, the Dolphins would find more than just two starters in this year's NFL draft from the jump. What are some of the positions that may provide a starter opportunity for Miami with their third pick at number 98?
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by the new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. Today, we are looking at the third pick that the Dolphins have. We've stacked the board for 13 and 48 and kind of looked at available talents in each one of those buckets and ranges and who the Dolphins could maybe expect to choose from and have a menu that fit the scheme, are ideally appropriate value, and fit the culture that this football team is trying to achieve. You get a little deeper now where you're doubling how long you have to wait, more than doubling from 48 to 98. It's a long wait for the Dolphins' third scheduled pick. So we're going to tackle this conversation a little bit differently. We're going to look at where are there starter opportunities that should be expected to be found at pick number 98, because there are some positions where positional value and norms are going to dictate they're not going to go as early in the draft. There might be a surplus or a honey hole of one late day two collection because of a bottleneck earlier or because of premium positions that go earlier. What does that waterfall effect look like for the Dolphins and their pick opportunity at 98? Because whether you like it or not, it is another compounding variable that determines your strategy on draft night. You anticipate, I believe it was Omar Kelly said this on X either yesterday or this morning. A good part of a successful draft plan is anticipating runs within certain position groups. And for the Dolphins, like last year, they got out in the front end of a running back run when they chose to make the move on early day three to go get Jalen Wright. There was a stretch of like 30 picks where you had like 12 running backs win. And the Dolphins got in on the earlier portion of that run. That was good anticipation on their part. There's been times in the past, you go back to the Liam Eichenberg pick. The Liam Eichenberg pick happened because the run happened early and they were picking at 50 and they were looking at their list of options dropping off the board. So they made a move to go up and get Liam Eichenberg, and that did not turn out to be an effective move for the Dolphins. So it cuts both ways. There's been successes and failures, but make no mistake, positional runs happen. And as momentum for a certain position starts to happen, it leads to them going in bunches. And you want to make sure that you're not the victim. And this has happened in many mock draft simulations for me with all the mock draft simulation tools that are out there. The well dries up quick. And you come on the clock after you made your second pick and you look at your third and you say, well, that didn't work out. Maybe instead of leaning towards that player at that position that maybe I like just a little bit more, you anticipate what's going to be left over for you for your next pick. So we're going to look at this from a three-pronged approach. We'll look at skill players, trench play, and back seven. The good news is for running backs, I would be surprised if the Dolphins went running back at pick number 98. And this, me talking about any of these positions, because we're going to talk about all of these positions, is not an endorsement to use pick number 98 on a running back. I think they're going to have a pretty decent chance of having some good names that are available, whether that's a Bashal Tutin or, from Virginia Tech, or a Trevor Etienne from Georgia, or a Damian Martinez from Miami, or a Devin Neal from Kansas, DJ Giddens from Kansas State, Brashard Smith from SMU. That position as a whole, you've got a special talent in Ashton Genty, and then Caleb Johnson, Quinshaw Judkins, Travion Henderson, kind of the consensus, along with Omar and Hampton from North Carolina, who may end up going in the first round, especially if teams scratch that itch early and go a couple first-round running backs. I certainly think the meat of that running back class is still going to be there for you. Pick number 98, which is a chance to, at that individual position, not saying I'm advocating for it, you would have a potential to get a starting caliber back. Wide receiver is a little bit of a different story, though, just because I think the depth of this wide receiver class is a challenge. I want to put this into perspective. I have my Dolphins-specific board up. And at the wide receiver position, I ended up doing, it was a little over 35, 40. I did 40 wide receivers. And I got about 25 with draftable grades. And then I kept watching other names. And I'm saying, okay, let me find the rest of the day 3 guys that I like. And of the rest of the group that I watched, 14 of them have UDFA grades. Where it's like, I just don't think the depth is here this year. But the top end talent it's a little interesting because you may not have a top 20 wide receiver predictably. I think you'll probably see one. Seems like Dallas may be leaning towards Tet McMillan. But then you have the Ibukas and the Goldens and the Burdens of the world. Then you have the Ohio State guys. Jack Betch on day 2, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll are the 2 Iowa State kids. And then it's Eli Guyominor from Stanford for me. He's also in that kind of second round bucket. We went over that when we stacked the board at 48. I only have 3 wide receivers that have third round grades. It's Savion Williams from TCU, Ty Felton from Maryland, and Trey Harris from Ole Miss. I have early day 3 grades on like a Jalen Royals or a Kyle Williams from Washington State, a Torrey Horton, Xavier Restrepo. There's names that I like, but are they starters? Are they depth players early? I think you need to catch lightning in a bottle as far as the scheme. And for Miami, who knows what ends up happening with number 10. The expectation is he's still going to be here. But, there were trade rumors before the latest headlines came out this week. Now, the speculation of whether or not they could swing it is a different story. But I think this is not a position group where I'm looking at the pick at 98 and saying, if you don't go wide receiver with one of your first 2 picks, I don't feel really good about your prospect of landing a surefire starter at 98. Tight end is even more slim, and I think there's a pretty clear divide between the top 4 guys and the rest of the class. It's Warren Loveland, Mason Taylor, and Elijah Arroyo. And kind of the next bucket down for me is Gunnar Helm from Texas. He might be there at 98. He's played in a parallel universe in Texas to a lot of what the Dolphins do offensively. I think there's a lot of correlative reps there. So he could maybe be a starter, but he's not going to start for you off the jump as a rookie coming in, with Jonnu Smith being the predominant tight end. Now, there's F and Y tight ends in different roles. I'd be surprised, though, if Gunnar Helm came in and beat out both Julian Hill and Pharaoh Brown for like the starting Y position at 98. And I like Gunnar Helm. I think long-term he could be a really productive player in this offense. But that's really kind of your pecking order for 98. So the well dries up pretty quick at the skill groups for starters. Now there's developmental players that can be long-term starters, but a guy that comes in with a lot of pressure to fill a critical role for your team in year 1, I don't see a lot of that appeal here, where running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends combined, I've got 9 third-round grades. And then the second-round grades in that same bucket, we've already kind of explored that. I have 7. So those 3 skill group positions combined, you end up having what? I'm not a math guy, but that was at 16? 16 second and third round grades at wide receiver, tight end, and running back combined. Now, if there's an urgency for them to go, you're not going to see a lot of attractive options at pick number 98. That's the bad news. The good news is I do think that leans into some of the Dolphins' other needs at potential spots elsewhere up and down the board. Does that include the trenches? That's a big wild card. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, a guy that has showcased the strength and power needed to push the Dolphins what we look forward to this next upcoming season. This week's Armada Clear-Cut Player of the Week is a potential target at 98 on the offensive line. It's Miles Frazier, guard tackle flex from the LSU Tigers. He is versatile. He's tough. He's got the ability to really road grade and create lanes in the running game while also providing sturdiness and reliability on the interior in the pass game and pass protection as well. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Miles Frazier could do for the Dolphins as a new addition on their offensive line. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of our other outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. I love a good segue. Weaving into our next block. And I would say this for offensive line. I like your options as early day 3 players more than the options that I personally have graded in the third round bucket because it is a lighter group. There's a number of tackles that I have third round grades on for the Dolphins in their scheme. That includes Ozzie Trapilo from Boston College, Anthony Belton from NC State, and Chase Lunt from UConn. The interesting foil between two of those names is Chase Lunt, the UConn tackle. He's a right tackle. He's one of the players that's most boosted by adjusting grades for the Dolphins scheme in the process that I have this year. So taking the 33rd team grades and converting them into Dolphins-specific grades. Lunt's one of the bigger boosts out of any player at any position at any juncture of the draft. Really gets aided by what he does well and how it would fit Miami. The contrast of that is Anthony Belton, who I have a higher grade on, not through the Dolphins lens, and he's hurt almost as much as any other player at any other position at any other juncture in the draft when filtering for the scheme, but still grades as a third-round player who could potentially play inside. I don't think Chase Lunt could play inside, and I don't think Ozzie Trapilo could play inside. So you're looking at authentic tackles. I have 3 that have third-round grades. Now, fringe second, third-round grade on Marcus Mbow, who I think plays inside at the next level, is much better suited to play there. But that athleticism and athletic profile that he has, he's probably going to be a player that the team gravitates towards at some point or really likes. And they had a chance to work hands-on with him at the Senior Bowl this year. The other player in the third-round bucket is Miles Frazier, who's played right guard, right tackle. He's played college ball for FAU and then transferred to LSU. And he was a left tackle early in his college career. So he's played on both the left and the right side of the line with guard and tackle flexibility. Players like that kind of check a lot of boxes for the Dolphins and what they like in their offensive linemen. Now, he's not the most fleet of foot, but he had a great week at the Senior Bowl. He was really impressive down there, and he left a big impression on me. If you drafted Miles Frazier, do I think he could beat out potentially all the competitors that exist for that opposite starting right guard or starting guard spot opposite James Daniels? Yes, I do. I think Miles Frazier could win that job. Now, there's names earlier that we've talked about. We've talked about Zabel and Donovan Jackson and Charles Grant and Tate Ratledge and Jonas Savinaya and Marcus Mbow. We talked about them. Those are all options, I think, at the top 50 if you're going to get your hands on them. I don't think any of those names make it to 98. But the next tier down, names that can be there, I do think you have a starting capable player in Miles Frazier. I think you have a starting capable player in Caleb Rogers from Texas Tech, who has also played guard and tackle and has a very impressive athletic profile where I think you can play him on the inside and protect him from some of his biggest weaknesses that he has to endure playing out at tackle. I think you could take Dylan Fairchild, the left guard from Georgia, at 98, and I think he could be a starter. I think Jalen Travis from Iowa State, a little bit more of a bigger body player, but he played in the Ivy League and then transferred for 1 year at Iowa State. His tools are off the charts. Really likable player. Is he an option at 98 to start, or is he an option at 116 with your early 4? Could I see a world in which he competes for a starting job? Sure. I could see a world in which that happens. He's graded lower, and he's comfortably in the 4th round bucket for me, but he's graded comfortably at a sub-tier below Caleb Rogers and Dylan Fairchild and Miles Frazier. And I put Wyatt Milam in this bucket as well. A lot of people don't like my 33rd team scouting report on Wyatt Milam because the comp I see a lot of is Liam Eichenberg. Now, the player Liam Eichenberg was supposed to be coming out of college is kind of the lens that I took the comp through. And I have a 4th round grade on Wyatt Milam, but at 98, I see enough that there could be an argument that from a scheme fit perspective, he makes sense. Would I love that pick? No. Do I think he could come in and beat Liam Eichenberg? Yeah, because I think you're working with a player that authentically plays at a heavier weight. He plays around 315. And you don't have all the bad muscle memory that comes with what Liam's been exposed to from having to move here, there, and everywhere, and the scheme changes and him being yanked around. And the Dolphins really didn't do him any favors with their player development plan for him. So I think at guard, you're going to have a reasonable chance to find a player that I think could compete to come in and start. Now, are they going to be a rock star player? Probably not. There's some scheme fits that I think you could get a little later on day 3 that maybe give you a comparable value. But, how long do you want to kick this can down the road before you just kind of pull the trigger and say, hey, we're going to take a player here because we need somebody we think can start. And I think they do need a player who they think can start. It's an even prettier picture at defensive tackle where what we mentioned as guys that are guard capable, we mentioned Miles Frazier, Anthony Belton, Caleb Rogers, Dylan Fairchild, Wyatt Milam, Jalen Travis. It's a reasonable bucket of names that should be available on that pick at 98. You get the defensive tackle, and you're looking at names that I think could be starters that might make sense. At pick number 98, I got double-digit names at defensive tackle, and that is not including Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, Tylik Williams, Alfred Collins, Walter Nolan, Darius Alexander. Now, some of these guys will go in between the picks at 48 and at 98. But I would expect the names that we just mentioned are the most realistic names to be gone in the top 50. And then it's, okay, what subsections of defensive tackles go that leave the door open for you to have somebody that makes it to 98, either as a nose tackle type player or as a guy who's a penetration type. Omar Norman-Lott from Tennessee is formerly from Arizona State. Big time pass rush productivity comp player. He's got like a 20% pass rush win rate and pressure rate as an interior defensive lineman at Tennessee, but he can't really play the run. So are you comfortable with taking a player like that? Would you be comfortable with him being a starter? Is he more of a skill specific kind of player that you can rotate in? Kind of how they did when they platooned Deshaun Hand and Benito Jones last year opposite Calais Campbell, and obviously Zach Sealer is a big piece of that puzzle. TJ Sanders from South Carolina is probably gone by 98, but he's another penetration type player. You've got Shamar Turner from Texas A&M. Dolphins had a 30 visit with Shamar Turner. That's a mean dude, and I like mean at defensive tackle. Probably gone by 98, but the way this is stacking, it's leaving names like Joshua Farmer from Florida State or Jordan Phillips, the defensive tackle, who's more of a nose tackle player, but has some upside to play on all 3 downs. From Maryland, one of the youngest players in the draft. He's a redshirt sophomore who declared. Went to the Shrine. Vernon Broughton, the other Texas defensive tackle, is in this conversation. CJ West from Indiana. Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech. Peebles is a 293 technique type player. CJ West is a kind of a Benito Jones type of build with a little bit more first step quickness. You got big time length guys like Josh Farmer and Vernon Broughton, who are big time point of attack. They could play the Deshaun Hand type role, and I think be starters early on. And this doesn't even get one of my favorite names, who's dealing with an injury and got injured late in the season, so probably not an option at 98 and certainly not an option to start at the beginning of the season. I see some Zach Sealer and Riley Mills from Notre Dame. I didn't mention Deion Walker. He's not for me. I'm going to be completely honest. that size, that surface level, that first step, that change, it's just, I think there's a lot of fool's gold there for me personally. I know a lot of you sent mocks that have Deion Walker at 98. And once upon a time, this cat was considered a first round mock draft pick. And the more you watch him play, I'm like, I just don't think these reps are going to translate to the NFL. I just don't. So he's not for me. So if you've sent mocks with Deion Walker at 98 and I didn't get back to you, my apologies, but he's not a player I'd be excited about adding into the mix. I think there's diminishing returns on his size that was passed a long time ago. And he plays upright. And he really can't get down in the stance. He's not flexible. He's got big time surface area. And I've seen a couple too many big-bodied guys that create push that they get to the league, and all of a sudden you're not creating the same level of push, and your liability to be out there on passing downs and isolation, and now you're giving up reps, and now you don't play enough to justify a draft capital pick where you're getting mocked. So did I mention Ty Robinson at all from Nebraska as another player? Like, there's going to be options at 98 at defensive tackle. It's a question of whether it's a skill-specific penetration type player or potentially a nose that could serve as a nose. Did we mention Jamari Caldwell from Oregon as like an authentic nose? There's some exciting options for the Dolphins with that pick at defensive tackle if that's where they wanted to go a little later in the draft. But of course, the challenge there is they probably need more than one. So you may be looking at a double dip opportunity at some point throughout the draft. But 98, like, I would get a guy that if you told me he played 400 snaps this year for you, I wouldn't bat an eye. I'd feel pretty comfortable with those options. We're looking at the back seven. It's coming your way next here on Locked On Dolphins, so make sure you guys stick with us. Linebackers are a weird group because I have one linebacker with a top 32 grade. It's Jihad Campbell. Actually, that's a lie. I do have Carson Schwessinger from UCLA, who's like player number 32. But Jihad Campbell and Carson Schwessinger, I think, are home run lock-in starters. This is kind of like tight end / guard where you don't have a lot of early draft urgency unless it's a pretty special type of player. So I look at, I only have 5 linebackers with first, second, or third round grades in this year's class. It's Campbell and Schwessinger, who are top 32 players. Demetrius Knight from South Carolina, who's kind of a close-quartered plug thumper. He's got good length. He's got good straight line speed. Like, his GPS timing is pretty good for like what he can do running linearly, but he's not the most loose or fluid guy. But he's got a great story. He's transferred around a couple of times. Would do like Uber Eats or DoorDash like the day of games or when he was playing at University of Charlotte to help food on the table for his child. So he's from a demeanor, intangibles perspective. If he's a player that's there at number 98, I would not be mad at all about a player like Demetrius Knight being added into the mix. But then I only have the 2 other linebackers, Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma and Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon. Bass is a little bit more of the undersized. I don't want to say Jerome Baker, but like he's kind of built like Jerome with the real lean, rocked up cut. Stutzman's the cowboy collar, throwback old school guy, plays with his hair on fire. And then Knight is the thick, long, rangy as far as like straight line speed, but physical to get downhill and defend the run and plug some blocks. You get into the 4th round, I only have 4 linebackers with 4th round grades. So by the time I get to linebacker 10, I'm into my 5th round grades. Can these guys start? Well, if they're there at number 98, if Jeffrey Bass is there at 98, do I think he could start? Yeah, I think he could start. If Danny Stutzman's there at 98, do I think Danny Stutzman could start? Yeah. But the group of 4th round guys that are kind of looking up at it is unique in the sense that I got Kobe King from Penn State, who I think is a great run defender, could be a great early down linebacker. You kind of think about what the Dolphins had with some of their run stuffers over the years. I think he could be that kind of player, but I don't think he's a passing down type. Probably more of a 116 type of option. Sean Dolak from Buffalo is super productive, was an All-American this year, set the program record for tackles like 2 consecutive seasons. He's not big. He's kind of Matt Milano-y from a build perspective. He's not even 230 pounds, and he's not the most quick twitch, as his instincts are off the charts type of good, but more of like a shorter-armed, quick and fluid, but not super explosive type athlete who wins with football instincts. And coming from a school like Buffalo, there's just a big leap there. I don't know that I would necessarily regard him as a starter at 98. Corner's interesting because I think when I stacked this board and you have Travis Hunter, Jahdae Barron, Will Johnson, Savon Revel, Trey Amos, Darian Porter, Benjamin Morrison, those are the corners for me that are like top 50. Jacob Parrish, I'll be fascinated to see where the league falls on him because he's somebody who I see very aggressively. Like, I think he could, if you told me the Dolphins drafted Jacob Parrish at 48 and he's going to start at corner, I'd say, okay. Like, I think he's capable of doing it. I think the film's that good. But the general consensus is he's more of a third-round type of player. I didn't mention Maxwell Hairston or Azareye'h Thomas, who I think are scheme-specific type of starters. But you get past that group, that's 9 corners. That's 10 corners with Jahdae Barron. You're past the 10, and now I think you're into the names that are left on the board. And I think there's some very situation-specific type of players that could be starters in the right environment, and I think the Dolphins could provide some of it. Noel Williams from Cal, 16 career interceptions, something like that, like crazy good ball production. You have Kobe Bryant from Kansas, who is undersized. He's tiny. I don't think he's a great fit for the Dolphins, but the man coverage stuff is attractive, and he plays above his weight class. You have Tommy Hill from Nebraska, who used to be a wide receiver, but has made the conversion and has big-time length and obviously some good ball skills, but needs to really brush up his technique. I don't think he's ready to be a starter right away. But then there's names below it. Dorian Strong from Virginia Tech, I think could be a starter in the right scheme. Marcus Siegel from Kansas State is kind of a safety nickel hybrid type of player. And I'll invoke him here because I think you could put Caleb Ransall from Tulane in the same boat where those are both plus athletes. They're very dynamic and like twitchy athletes that tackle well. They fit the run well. They could be really fascinating nickel options if you were going to move Kader Kohu outside. And I think either one of those players, because they're safety and nickel and the positional value domino effect of that, I think either one of those guys could claim a starting job in this defense. So I think that can serve as a nice bridge for us to look at safety, where I think the meat of the safety class, you might have a couple of the names in the third tier that are gone by the time the Dolphins get on the board at 98, but I think that's where the meat of the safety class is going to be present and available and make sense, where it's Starks, Eamon in the first round, and Xavier Watson, Andrew Makuba are either contenders to go top 50, or maybe Makuba doesn't go. I think it'd take probably a miracle, in my opinion, for him to get there at 98. But if he is, that's like a run the card in, no questions asked type of pick. You get past those 4, and safety 5 for me is Lathan Ransom. And Ransom, I think, can be a starter. I see Talanoa Hufanga type vibes in his game, and the way that he comes downhill and attacks the run, and how the Dolphins, they want to have some diversity in their safeties. And I think he's not rangy enough to play in the high post, but he could play half field stuff and then come downhill and fit the run. It makes sense. Kevin Winston from Penn State, another from depth tackler and fitter. Jonas Sanker from Virginia. Jalen Reed, the other Penn State safety. Billy Bowman, Oklahoma. I have Malachi Moore from Alabama in this bucket as well. We mentioned Siegel and Ransall from Kansas State and Tulane as kind of guys that are hybrid nickels and safeties. I think you're definitely going to have a safety nickel option on the board at 98 that you feel could start. So does that impact if you have a tie between, say, hypothetically, a Malachi Starks, a Kenneth Grant, and let's just say hypothetically, I don't know, where do we want to go? Will Campbell? Like, the tiebreaker for me in that scenario, if you covet all three of those players fairly closely, looking at how limited the options are to get good value, not just at 48, but also at 98, might push you to take Will Campbell. And he can impact the passing game, because I know that's a big thing, is you want to have production with your picks, not just in the form of being able to start, but being able to move the needle in where the metrics are most evident, in that where you consistently are winning football games if you measure well. But I'd say the other part of the puzzle here is snaps. I want guys in all three of these picks in the top 100. They're going to play snaps and play meaningful snaps, and you feel good about it. And that's kind of the argument against, well, don't take a nose tackle at 13, because the snaps he's going to take are not commensurative to what you would take if you took a full-time safety or a full-time offensive lineman. They're going to play 3x the amount of snaps in the season. And I think that's a factual statement, and I think it's a valid argument to kind of sort through all of those decisions along the way. So to answer the question that we started the show with, where will you definitively find starting caliber options at pick number 98 in the draft? I think you should feel best about your chances at finding a starting caliber player at safety at number 98. I think you have very good chance of finding a starting caliber defensive tackle in one kind of role or another at number 98 as well. And I think you have fair chances of finding a starting caliber guard. Your skill group, not so much, especially with what the Dolphins currently have invested in the skill group. Linebacker, not so much. I think the edge group's really crowded and overpopulated. Maybe there's a name there that can kick into some of the inside stuff and that can help bail you out as well. But all three of the primary needs, unless you were going to put corner in there, which I think it's a little bit more of a leaner pecking order for outside corners. Safety, I feel the best about. Defensive tackle, I feel next best about. And then the guard spot, I think there's names, but there's names that come with fine print of transitioning from tackle or playing in the Big 12 and converting to NFL fronts, and how that's going to change and how that alters the projection for those players as well. But you're going to have a puncher's chance at all three. Which one do I have the highest confidence in? It's safety. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'll be back again if we get some big news. We'll talk about it in real time. And if not, I'll see you all again on Monday. Go Fins.